Hey guys, Bear Clark here from Bear Loves Film, and today I want to look at Ready Player One. This is a non-spoiler review, so anything I talk about is just what would have been seen in the trailers. So this is a new Steven Spielberg film. It takes him very much back to his old roots of almost like a Saturday matinee adventure type films. It basically follows, for want of a better term, a bunch of kids that who want to get a better life for themselves and for the world, because this is in the near future. Basically, there's been almost a financial apocalypse where the world has pretty much crumbled. You've obviously got the corporate overlords that own the vast majority of the wealth, and everybody else just gets by. Now, they get by pretty much immersing themselves completely in a virtual digital VR world, the world of the OASIS. Now, the OASIS is like a multiplayer game, like a high-res, extremely integrated version of Warcraft, and where you can literally be anyone you want to be. Now, this is important because not only does it give people their way of earning money and also very losing money, but it also gives them the escape from the drudgery of life. In fact, it tells us partway through the film that most of the time people only step out the OASIS to eat, go to the toilet and to sleep. So it's really a reflection of how the world is going at the moment, with VR technology pushing forward, with gaming advances going such a high rate, people getting immersed in games, and basically it turns from an hour or two on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One or whatever to escape from the monotony of school or work or life in general, as to actually planning your whole life inside the OASIS. People meet and make friends. I say that friends in air quotes because they never actually meet them in real life, but they make friends through the OASIS, they date through the OASIS. And also, if you're used to gaming, if you've done things like, for instance, in Warcraft PvP, or if you've done Battlefront, or if you've done any of the online Call of Duty type games and you're fighting against other people, that's actually a way to make a lot of money in the OASIS. Bear in mind, this is only digital currency in the OASIS. You can make it and you can lose it. So for instance, you can win battle matches, pass certain quests, win adventures, etc., and get paid your digital money that you then use to buy upgrades. There's also lots of power-ups, etc., you can find in the game, and loot crates. Obviously, loot crates is something that's quite controversial with a lot of games nowadays, but I think chances are it's probably an unfortunate future that loot crates allow you to use real-life money to buy upgrades that therefore gives you an edge on, therefore more likely to win. So we have people who, for instance, we have a character who basically gets all their savings and spends it on upgraded weapons, loses their match, and therefore loses all of their money. Now, if you lose all your money in the game, there are ways to get money back. You can just scrub for it, basically. You can just go into low level battlegrounds and cheap shot people and make up a few coins that way and eventually build your way up. Or you can borrow the money, and if you borrow the money and then you owe it, can't pay it back, you then end up in debt. Now, this is where we have Mendelsohn's character as the real bad guy of the scene, because basically he owns the second biggest company in the world, IOI, and they have a loyalty system, or they call it loyalty camps. But basically, if you lose money in the digital world, you're then taken in the physical world to a digital work camp. So you basically got factories full of little boxes with people in VR sets who are working inside those little huts doing digital work to repay their debt. But it's structured in such a way that with the interest payments, etc., they'll never actually get out of debt. So when you go to one of these, effectively an intern camp, you're never going to get out. And in fact, that's one of the motivators of one of the characters, is that their parents actually died inside these loyalty camps, repaying debts that they made in the OASIS. So there's a dark side to the OASIS, but the upside is that it allows people to be whatever they want to be. So Wade Wilson, who's the main character in the film, escapes into this every chance he can possibly get. He's been orphaned, he's living with his aunt and her extremely physically and mentally abusive druggy type boyfriend, and he escapes into the OASIS, where he makes a number of friends, and basically the creator of the OASIS, because the OASIS, if you imagine something that rolls all the Call of Duty type games and Facebook and YouTube and everything, imagine rolling that all into one. You can imagine the size of the company that would be. So the OASIS Corporation is basically the biggest company in the world. It's worth trillions of dollars. And Halliday, who is the creator of the OASIS, just before he died, he left a legacy. His legacy was that he would leave clues within the game to 3 magic keys. These magic keys would eventually open up and provide an Easter egg. That Easter egg, once you win it, you then take control of the OASIS and the trillions of dollars that come with it. So I think it was interesting that it didn't just show single people going after this, because you imagine people in the OASIS, their life is rubbish, they want to make the best they can of themselves. So basically everybody's looking for these Easter eggs, but not just individuals. Obviously you get what they call gangers, where you get groups of people together who work as teams, just like you would do on a battleground or a PvP type scenario in a game. You also get large corporations, including IOI, who spend millions of pounds recruiting gamers who basically sit in VR constantly on rotational shifts trying to find these Easter eggs, because IOI at the end of the day want to own the OASIS. They become the first and second biggest company together. They control everything. So Wade Wilson's looking for a way out of this. Now within the OASIS, he chances a meet with a particular girl who he basically digitally falls in love with her. So she plays a very, very strong female character called Artemis. He becomes infatuated with her. Now, to give you too much more would spoil the film, and this is definitely a film you want to see. This is definitely a film you want to see in a cinema. But suffice to say, it becomes a group of youngsters fighting through odds, trying to solve puzzles, trying to stay alive both in the OASIS and in the real world, until they can solve these puzzles, which will give them the enlightenment and the ability to make life better for everybody and to foil the bad guy. So in that respect, it's a pretty standard sort of storyline, which is what Spielberg really does well at, because he can take a very, very standard format and make it a spectacle. There's a shark eating people at the beach, and you need to go out in a boat and fish for it and kill the shark. It's a very basic premise, but he makes a spectacle of it, and a spectacle of it is. As I say, you want to see this in the cinema. Now, I saw it in 2D. In about the first 5-10 minutes, I was thinking to myself, I wish I'd gone to see this in IMAX, because I think it'd be amazing. Then we get into a race scene. It's something that you see a little bit of in the trailers, where you see rows of cars going for a race. Now, that's the first stage of this race to find the first clue, the first key. It's based on this race, and the race goes at a breakneck speed with everything happening around it. Everybody's got their own vehicles. We've got from Artemis, who's driving the motorbike from Akira, to Wade's character Parzival, who is driving the DeLorean from Back to the Future. We've got the Batmobile in there, monster trucks in there, everything is in there. Now, that goes at such a breakneck speed, but I was actually watching that and I was thinking to myself, actually, do you know what, if I think I watched this in 3D, I think I'd probably puke. So it'd be interesting to see if people who are watching in 3D agree. But it is an amazing spectacle. So probably 2/3 of the film happens in the OASIS. You've got 1/3 that happens in the real world. Sometimes that's a little bit jarring, because you get so far into the OASIS and with these characters, these avatars, that when it cuts back to the real world, you kind of think, I want to go back in the OASIS, which is quite clever, actually, because you think that's what people want to do within the film. They want to get back into OASIS. They want to escape the drudgery of the real world. And the cinematography is such that the real world is very grey and grainy. It's almost a dystopian future, whereas the OASIS is massively bright neon colours, and it is the ultimate playground, because you can be whoever you want to be. Now, there is a huge amount of pop reference cultures in here based on the book, which you see an awful lot in the trailers. It's one of those things where, for months afterwards, when this comes out on DVD or streaming, people will be stopping it every few seconds and making notes. I have heard that they think there's actually over 300 particular type Easter egg or cult references in the film. I found myself regularly getting a stupid great Cheshire grin on my face when I see something that I referenced. So there's a lot to love in here. From, you know, you're talking about your Star Treks, you're talking about horrors, you're talking about, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s sci-fis. There's so much crammed in here. The music references like Duran Duran, etc., they're all in there. And it is a beautiful looking film. It's not a perfect film, far from it. It doesn't very much explain exactly what happened to get this world where it is. There are references at the beginning of the film. Basically, the main character starts talking through, you know, narrates the first few stages of the film, or the first few seconds rather of the film, saying about that there was a massive broadband drought and things like that. So obviously things went to hell and back. But it would have been nice to have a bit more world building to know exactly why that is. But that said, the film sweeps you in pretty quickly. You understand the basic concept very quickly. Everything pretty much makes sense. With the acting is very good. Obviously part of it is in real life acting, the rest of it is voice acting. Olivia Cooke, who plays Artemis, is particularly a standout. I'm a fan of her work anyway, and she's particularly good in this film. Tye Sheridan as the main character didn't quite grip me as much. It's a solid performance, but I can't say that I was really wowed by his contribution. But it worked, but it wasn't outstanding. There was a lack of character development because everything moves in such a race, such a pace. There is, you may have heard the odd reference, etc., on forums about there's a homage to a particular horror film in the middle of this film, which is done extremely well. It's helpful if you've seen the film beforehand to enjoy it best, but I can't tell you what that film is, because if I did I'd spoil it. But you can always watch this at the cinema, then watch that horror film before you get the DVD, because I'm sure you'll want to buy the DVD of this film and watch it again at home because of all these references. And the references also are not just for the older references, but there's some newer references in there as well. So whether an old git like me can recognise the old Batmobile from the old TV series, but there's also things like those characters from Blizzard Entertainment's Overwatch, which has only been out a couple of years, and Halo, etc. So there's new references as well as old. Now, the one thing I didn't like about this film was one particular character, and that's the T.J. Miller's character. Obviously, he plays a bad guy, or a bad avatar, but he's also the kind of a comedy bad avatar, and I think that comedy bad avatar was bad comedy. Personally, it didn't work for me. I mean, if you did, you know, let me know. But by and large, this film is a real thrill ride from start to finish. There's a huge amount of love in there. It's amazing references for people that are into the science fiction and horror and films, etc. But it also doesn't require you to know all these things. You could sit and watch it having watched none of these things and still have a real blast. So for me, this film was a real blast. It's definitely worth seeing in the cinema. Don't put it off and just watch it on streaming. I would definitely watch it in the cinema while you can. The bigger screen, the better. IMAX possibly as well if you can afford it. And if you don't get motion sickness, it's definitely one of the better films so far this year. It's a great start to what's going to be a very busy couple of months with Solo and Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool 2, etc. coming out. So for me, it gets a very well deserved A-, and it's definitely recommended to see. Now, if you have seen this film and you want to discuss it on the chat board below, please no spoilers, or if you do have any spoilers, just put them behind a spoiler warning. This is a film that, although it's a fairly simple story, it benefits from you going in without knowing all the ins and outs of it, and I definitely recommend you see it. So let me know what you think about it, and I'll see you next time.